Hello, scientific writers. Welcome to the next lesson. This lesson is on keeping your reader engaged by writing with clarity. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about quite a few common problems that are confusing for readers, and they make it harder for readers to understand what you're saying. And that makes extra work for the reader. And if you know my philosophy of scientific writing, the number one rule is to make it easy for your readers. So we don't want to confuse them and cause them to have extra work in thinking about what you're writing, trying to understand what it is that you are saying to them. Let's start by looking at the learning objectives or the learning outcomes for this lesson. Because it's a long list of different topics, I'm going to keep the learning objectives pretty simple. After this lesson, you'll be able to recognize common errors in sentences. You'll be able to explain why they are errors, and you'll be able to correct those common errors. Today we have 11 different common errors that we're going to talk about. So let's take a look at the list, which is our overview of this lesson. Problems that confuse readers and reduce clarity include noun clusters, jargon, starting a sentence in the middle of the idea, pomposity or overly fancy language, misplaced modifiers, faulty predication, faulty coordination, separating the subject and the verb, having the verb at the end of the sentence, using respectively in your sentence construction, and problems with tenses. So I think you're going to enjoy this lesson. I know this is the kind of stuff that I really enjoy editing, finding these kinds of problems and repairing the sentences, making them read more clearly. I just love doing this stuff. So I hope you enjoy this lesson. Let's get started. So we'll start with our first topic, noun clusters. What are noun clusters? Noun clusters are also called noun trains or noun strings by different writing experts. You have a noun cluster when there are 4 or more nouns in a row in your sentence. So they're either nouns or words that are usually used as nouns. They might be used as adjectives sometimes in these noun clusters. Nonetheless, they're normally used as nouns. And what happens when a reader gets to a noun cluster in a sentence or a paragraph is that they really have to stop and think. It takes a lot of cognitive effort to sort through a noun cluster. You'll see why here in a second when I show you some examples. So here's our first example. This example is actually from a title of a paper. Improved apple latent spherical virus-induced gene silencing in multiple soybean genotypes through direct inoculation of agro-infiltrated Nicotiana benthamiana extract. So, do you see where the noun cluster is? It's right there at the beginning. Improved apple latent spherical virus-induced gene silencing. So when you get to this phrase, you really have to unpack it. It's a complicated series of nouns to work your way through. What I would suggest revising this title to is as follows. Improved gene silencing in soybean using apple latent spherical virus by direct inoculation of plant extract. I have broken up this noun cluster, and I have also simplified the title a little bit. I took out some of the methodological references. Agro-infiltrated Nicotiana benthamiana, I don't think that's really necessary in the title. We'll just call it plant extract. Now instead of saying improved apple latent spherical virus-induced gene silencing, we have improved gene silencing. And then I've described that gene silencing with some prepositional phrases. In soybean, using apple latent spherical virus by direct inoculation of plant extract. I recognize that we still have apple latent spherical virus, which is 4 nouns in a row. But that's the name of this virus. So there's really no way to break that up without making it become incorrect, because the name of the virus is apple latent spherical virus. So we have to live with that noun cluster, but we broke up the bigger one. Here's another noun cluster. Again, this is from a title. Bond behavior of iron-based shape memory alloy reinforcing bars embedded in concrete. It has good information in the sentence, but is really hard to read and sort through. If I were to suggest a revision to these authors, what I would say is this one. Bond behavior of iron-based reinforcing bars made with shape memory alloy when embedded in concrete. So we've broken up the noun cluster into some prepositional phrases to explain the parts of that cluster a little bit better. The next item on our list is to avoid too much jargon. So I don't say never use any jargon, but I'm saying avoid too much jargon. So what is jargon? Jargon is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, as you see here. Definition number 1, the technical terminology or characteristic idiom of a special activity or group. Number 2, obscure and often pretentious language marked by circumlocutions and long words. And number 3 is confused, unintelligible language. So I think all 3 of those definitions apply to what I'm talking about when I say jargon. Now, in my opinion, we have to use technical terminology. We can't avoid talking in technical terms when we're talking to other scientists in our field. We need to use the correct terminology. But the second part of that definition says characteristic idiom of a special activity or group. That's the part that I'm focused on, is the characteristic idiom of the special group. So we want to avoid using terms that are not specifically technical terms, but that are terms that this group knows that exclude other people that don't know these terms. And when the readers find the language unintelligible, what do? They stop reading. And if they stop reading, they're probably not going to cite what you have written, and they're probably not going to review it very favorably, and that's going to hurt your chances of getting published or getting your grant funded. Let's take a little bit deeper dive into jargon. I really like this quote from Martinez and Mamola in an article published in 2021. Jargon illustrates complex concepts only in the minds of those sharing a common background, while precluding everyone else from understanding. A reader might not understand the jargon at all, get the message only partially, or, after an extra mental effort, figure out its meaning. Now, on the right side of this slide, you can see a figure from this article, and they show 2 different panels. The top one is comparing the proportion of jargon in the title to the citation rate. And the bottom one is comparing the proportion of jargon in the abstract to the citation rate. As you have a lower proportion of jargon in the title or in the abstract, you have a higher citation rate. In other words, as the jargon proportion increases, we see the citations start to fall off. The take-home message here is reduce the amount of specialized terminology as much as possible and avoid using too much jargon in your writing. So here's an example of using jargon in the case that it is a correct technical term, but it's a technical term that hardly any people are going to know, and it's really not relevant to the rest of this paper. So we could use more simple language. In this case, it is also greatly appreciated and commercialized for its organoleptic properties. Now I had to look up organoleptic. I've never heard that word before, so it immediately excluded me, even though I'm a PhD level scientist. And once I looked it up, I found out what it meant, the properties of flavor and texture. So why shouldn't we just say that? And instead of saying greatly appreciated and commercialized, let's try to simplify those words. My revision is suggested here. It is also valued by consumers for its flavor and texture. Now, I think that has the exact same meaning of the original sentence, but it's written in a jargon-free way.